Hi folks, welcome back to the bench. Today we've got this beautiful Martin in for us, which is having a full setup. We're going to be concentrating on the truss rod, we're going to be lowering the saddle down, make it a little bit easier to play, and lastly we're going to be cutting the nut slot depths to ensure perfect playability across the board. We're going to show you the step-by-step process. Come and join us. Right then guys, let's discuss the truss rod. We're going to use two methods today. The first one, we'll be using some feeler gauges, and this is going to give us the most accurate measurement possible, down to the thousandth of an inch. We could do it millimetres or whatever your measurements are around the world, but this is perhaps the best method to achieve sort of perfect clarity numerically. I will then show you an alternative approach if we haven't got any of these, what we can do to eyeball it. It will be a little bit suck it and see for the second one, but I'm sure either way is going to be better than no way at all. So let's have a look at the first method. So for this first approach, I'm going to be looking at trying to get about 8 thou under the distance between the string and the fretboard. I've got my plectrum helping me press down at the bottom, and we're going to see around about the 6th fret what sort of clearance we have. I've got just a little bit of scrape. I don't know if that's audible on the camera. I'll find out in the editing process. But we're just slightly scraping 0.008 of an inch. And I'm going to make an initial truss rod just to lift that very slightly so it's not catching. This measurement might apply to you. You might like it a little bit closer. But I'm going to head for 8 thou on the 6th fret. And if I can lift that just a fraction, I think I'll be happy with that. The second method, before I make my truss rod adjustment, we could have held down the bottom as per my friendly plectrum earlier and used my finger to tap the board to ensure we've got a little bit of a bounce. I will zoom in so you can see this on a close-up, and we have got the little bounce there. It would need an adjustment from an eyeballing situation, but this will give us just a little bit more of an accurate representation. I'll show you the finger tap method as well, and you can see what we're going to try and do to make a difference. Here we have our strings, so I'm pressing this end down, I'm also pressing this end down, and we're going to try and see if we can get a bounce on the string. And there's a very, very slight bounce, but not really enough that I would consider the correct clearance. We've got a tiny little bounce there, just on the string, just about there, but that is nowhere near enough for us to ensure we have no fret buzz. That's the alternative method to look at if you don't have any sort of feeler gauges present. And as we've mentioned before, with truss rod adjustments, it's important to use the right size Allen key or wrench if it's that particular mechanism. We don't want to be inserting anything incorrectly and damaging the truss rod alignment or the area where we're going to adjust it. So do consult manufacturer's website or speak to a local guitar tech before you attempt it yourself. If you already know your measurements, then absolutely fantastic. We're going to make just a small adjustment this time because, as you could see from our feeler gauge and the finger tap method, we weren't far away. So I'm going to make an initial adjustment. We'll use the feeler gauge approach and then I'll use the finger tap approach again. Let's see if we can see a difference. And now for our remeasure, I've got my friendly neighbourhood plectrum still sitting in place with my feeler gauge under the 6th fret, and there is no scratching on that bottom string. It is just sitting on top of that feeler gauge. I will try and zoom in for a close-up on that, and we'll now do the finger tap test as well, just to see the visual difference. Again, you may need to adjust this a few times, or to suit yourself, you may prefer a different style of playing or a slightly lower action. These are just the general rules of thumb to get it where it shouldn't be buzzing. You may need to tweak it here or there, but this is definitely the first step done and sorted. And as we can see, there's our little bounce. Right then guys, truss rod's done. Let's concentrate on the saddle. We'll take an initial measurement just to see where we are and what the situation is. Customers asked for a relatively low action and we want to look after Dave, so we're going to try and get it as low as we can. Let's get zoomed in and then we can make our adjustments. And as we can see, we are at just north of 3.25. I'm going to zoom up very, very slightly for us. And as we can see on our mid column here, I will move my finger out the way, that our high action would be 2.8. If that's considered high and we're already at 3.25, we're going to look to try and bring this down to something like sort of 2 mil maybe between 1.75 and 2 mil. So we want a low or a low medium action, but certainly at 3.25 we are already considered high. Let's get to work. Right then guys, we've spoke about saddles before and bringing them down. We've got two options. We've got our foil system or we've got our sandpaper method. I'm going to use both today. We're going to bring the initial millimetre or so down with our foil and then I'm going to finalise on the sandpaper. So let's make our first adjustments. Try to keep the foil as flat as you can as you're doing this, and the same for our saddle. We want him clamped and flat. It's important to have this finished article as flat as possible. We don't want any higher sides than another. I'll make a couple of passes, I'll zoom in so you can see, and then we'll get finalised on the sandpaper. We've got a bonus tip here as well, folks. With the strings loose and the saddle off, just before I finalise the foiling, take the time to check your battery. There's a little pouch inside some of these martins, and we can then have a little look, test the battery, make sure it's still working. If it isn't, replace it. We can then put it straight back in. This is always the best time to try and get it done while the strings are loose. Right then guys, we're just finalising this last couple of bits, nice and flat, and every 10 or 15 turns with this, we're going to swap it round, and that's going to ensure that we get a clean and even sand across. We don't want any uneven sides, so 10 to 15 passes that way. We're going to swap over, repeat the process, and then let's get it remeasured. And there we have it folks, 2 mil action. We can now go on to the nut cutting part of the setup. It's the first time we're going to probably need some proper tools and proper foils. This is one of the most intricate parts of the job with very subtle differences. They've all been like that so far, the truss rod, the saddle. If we get this wrong, it's problematic. So go slow and steady and remeasure and recheck. You can always take a bit more off. You can't put any more back on. So nice and slowly, we're going to zoom in for a close-up and we're aiming to see what the distance of the string is away from the fret, and we can then make our initial adjustments. Let's zoom in, we'll have a little look. And as we can see, we've got just a little bit of a bounce, which means this nut slot needs to come down a little bit more, and we're going to try and reduce that down so it's just nice and snug. So for this motion, folks, we're going to take the string away. We're going to get our foil. We've measured the depths that we need. We've got a rough idea how far we want to come down, and I'm just going to make a couple of little passes back and forth, and then we're going to remeasure to see how we've got on. And that is absolutely perfect. No bounce at all. We'll now repeat the process for the rest of the strings, and then we will have completed our setup. And there we have it folks, one Martin guitar set up and ready for action. Whether you have a go yourself or use a qualified tech, you can at least appreciate some of the work that's gone in to make this play even better than it did before. Any questions, any comments, anything you'd like to see, do drop us a comment above, below. I really don't know where the comment section is. I do need to find out. I'm Jamie, your local tech, and as always, another day, another guitar. See you soon.